We are live.
Namaskara. Good evening and a warm welcome to all in our today's Youthwing workshop. Before beginning today's workshop, I would like to give a brief introduction about Gokul. BSKBA Association, popularly known as Gokul, is a 96-year-old charitable trust in Mumbai, and our activities include a community center at Sion and a home for senior citizens at Nerul in Navi Mumbai. With over 5,000 members, we have been actively interacting for religious, cultural, and social causes. In this time of COVID, BSKBA Youthwing is conducting Sunday interactive sessions along with the Talent Hunt series. Today, we present to you Baking with Shraddha Rao from USA. Shraddha, daughter of Ashit and Usha Rao, is a senior BI analyst and at Blend 360 based in Washington, D.C. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Information Technology from Mumbai University and a Master of Science in Information System from Syracuse University. She has also published a paper in IJERT on offline signature verification and forgery detection using critical region matching method. She manages her work life by dancing, baking, hiking, and traveling on the weekends. Shraddha is also a trained Bharatanatyam dancer and has been learning since she was 8 years old. Currently, she pursues her study with Rashi Naren in the Pandanallur style of Bharatanatyam and previously trained with Tejaswini Lele from Tanjavur Nrityashala. As a young girl, Shraddha was fascinated by watching her mother and grandmother work their baking magic in the kitchen. Growing up, she tried her hands at the craft, and once she baked her first cake, there was no turning back. She loves experimenting with different types of desserts and is successful in baking a variety of cakes, madeleines, biscottis, and right now she is working on her macaroon baking skills. So I welcome Shraddha and request you to take over.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. Hello, everyone. I'm Shraddha Rao. So I've been staying in the States since 2016, and I've been working as a BI analyst with a management consulting firm. So like Tanvi mentioned, used to, like when I was growing up, I used to watch my mom and my grandmom kind of bake cakes for my brother and my birthdays. And initially it was just the excitement that my grandmother would use like gems to decorate on the cake. And that's why I used to like love watching her decorate it. And that's where the interest in baking began. So when I was growing up, I started helping Amma to bake our birthday cakes. It would be as simple as, creaming the butter and sugar, or just sifting the flour, or just getting the pan ready. So step by step, Amma introduced me to this baking world. And then one day, like she just handed over the reins. And once I baked my first cake, there was like literally no turning back. So I used to bake when I was in India. My mom, dad have been my guinea pigs of all my baking experiments. So thank you, Amma Appa, for being there. So this journey wouldn't have been possible without you guys. Once I moved to US for my master's, it kind of reduced because I was like, there was so much studies to do and like other things to manage. But once I started working, I started carving out more time to pursue this hobby. And so I end up baking mostly on the weekends. So I started with baking all simple stuff, worked on my basic baking skills. And thereon I started working on more difficult desserts. I started improving on my piping skills. And that's something about my baking journey. So today, what I'm going to share today is my favorite recipe. That's an orange cake. It's an eggless orange cake. To explain in one line how to bake a cake, trust me, it's actually what I say. Take all the wet ingredients that are listed in the list, just mix them up. Take all the dry ingredients, mix them up, and then combine the two together. Put it in a pan and bake for about 15 to 20 minutes, and you have a really nice cake. Trust me, it's actually that simple. So before I begin with the workshop, I just wanted to take a break to see if you have had any questions. If not, I'll just go ahead and introduce to the different ingredients that we'll be using today. So what you can see on the table is right now, these are my ingredients basic. So I have sugar, I have baking soda, I have baking powder, some salt, some curds. So I'm using curd as an egg replacement in this. And that's like a good egg replacement. I have some oranges, I have oil. So that's going to be my fat. Instead of butter, I'm using oil. So using oil while baking cakes helps that the cake is very soft. So even when you keep it in the refrigerator and take it out, it still has that softness and the freshness in the cake. So sometimes when you end up using butter, because butter hardens in the fridge, the cake kind of becomes hard. So you have to wait for some time till it, comes down to the regular temperature, and then you can actually consume it. We have vanilla extract, we have some orange juice, and the main ingredient is the flour. So these are just the ingredients that we use. So, I mean, these are ingredients that you normally, like, it's easily available. So that's why I said this is like one of my favorite recipes. You don't have to run around for 10 places to actually get them. Yeah, so these are my ingredients. So the first thing whenever you start to bake is you need to keep in mind three things. First is be sure that you have measured all your ingredients and it is right at an easy access. Because you sometimes, if you don't measure and keep it right in front of you before you begin baking, you tend to mess it up. You might skip out on one of the ingredients and kind of ruin the entire recipe process. So with easy cakes, it's not that difficult to miss, but when you are trying to bake something more difficult, there are different ways to kind of combine the ingredients. So you might lose out on all of those steps, and your cake might not turn out to be good. And this is also from my personal experience. I started baking an apple pie once, and I made it all nice. I had the crust ready. I made the filling. I put it in the oven. 10 minutes later, I realized I did not add sugar because that was my fault of not keeping all the ingredients ready. So since that time, I have always maintained this practice of having my ingredients ready before I even start making any of the next steps. So once you have your ingredients ready, they are measured and they're at your easy access, the next step is to prep the pan that you're using for baking. So with today's cake recipe, you can either make an 8-inch cake or you can make 6 cupcakes. So I have had both ready right now to show you. So you can take your baking pan and then just put the cupcake liners in it. And since it yields 6, I've just prepared like 6 slots in this. And if you're using an 8-inch pan, I would recommend you to grease it very well before you use it. So there are 2 ways to kind of grease a pan. One, you can take some butter, just apply around. Butter or ghee, anything is fine, and then dust it using either all-purpose flour or powdered sugar. So that is one way of greasing a pan. The second way is you can also use something as this baking spray. So you just spray all around the pan nicely, and then you can put a parchment paper in the bottom, and this is how your pan is ready for baking. So this is the other step that you should do it before you start your actual baking session. And the last is to prep your oven. So each cake has a different temperature at what they bake. So when you actually set the oven at that right temperature before you start baking, and for this cake, it's 180 degrees Celsius, or if in Fahrenheit, it's 356 degrees Fahrenheit. So you kind of prep the oven, and by the time you kind of end up making your batter ready, putting it in the cake mold, the oven reaches the right temperature and it is setting up. So once the batter is ready, you can immediately put it to bake, and you do not have to wait till the oven is ready to reach the temperature. So it's always advised that as soon as your batter is ready, you end up baking it and not keeping it out for a long time. So this is a basic prep that you need to do before you start baking. So the next thing is, I told, measuring the ingredients. So there are actually a lot of different ways that I've seen bakers do to measure an ingredient. Especially when you are going through a recipe and they have said, like we need 3/4 cup of flour, that should be spooned and leveled. Like what do they mean? And even if it is not mentioned always in the recipe, that's the best practice to follow. So I mean, this method has been vouched by many professional bakers whose blogs I keep on reading and whose videos that I keep on following. So I'll show you the best method, like the right way to actually measure an ingredient. So to begin with, I'll first take my mixing bowl and put a sieve on it. So this is because any of the dry ingredients that you take have to be sifted. So this ensures that there is no clumps of flour or clumps of any baking powder or baking soda that you're using. And it also helps you to catch any of like small stones or any dust particle that's actually present in the flour. So this ensures that it happens. So now I'll be measuring my dry ingredient. The first one is the all-purpose flour. So every time you measure your all-purpose, like any of the dry ingredient, be sure that you kind of end up fluffing the flour. So this make sure, because when you start storing these ingredients for a long time, because of the moisture, they start clumping up, and this kind of fluffing it up helps to break all those clumps and helps you to measure them easily. So I take my measuring cup. So for this recipe, I need 3/4 cup of flour. So I'm taking my measuring cup and then I'm just using the spoon to fill it. And I'll fill it as long as it kind of overflows the cup. You don't have to press it to, and you don't have to pack it, and you just fill it up nicely. That should be good enough. So like you can see, I have overflowed my cup here, and then I'm using a knife. You can also use the back of a spoon or any hard object like a cardboard paper or a very thick paper to kind of level it up. But I prefer using a spoon, a knife. So I kind of make sure that I remove all the extra flour from my cup. And then once I've done it, in one stroke, I make sure that it is level. So this is the right way to actually measure any dry ingredient that you're using in your baking. So once I have that, I put in my mixing bowl. So I have my dry ingredient number one, that's my all-purpose flour. So in the similar way, you measure all your other dry ingredients. And in this recipe, we have baking soda, baking powder, and salt. These are our main dry ingredients. So I have my all-purpose flour in the first mixing bowl. Then I'm adding some baking soda, some baking powder, and salt. So once I've added this, my next step is to actually sift this. So I'm just going to use a spoon and slowly mix it up till I don't see any flour or any baking soda or powder in this sieve. Okay, so I've sifted all of my dry ingredients. You can see there's nothing in this sieve, and we have the powder here nice and mixed up. So I'll keep my dry ingredients aside. So the next step in the baking process is to combine all the wet ingredients. So I'm taking another bowl for my wet ingredients. So in this, I'll be using 1/2 cup of sugar. I know sugar is a dry ingredient, but in every baking process, like especially when you're making a cake, the next step after you kind of mix all your dry ingredients is to mix the sugar with the fat that you're using. So it can be either oil or it can be butter. In this case, since I'm using yogurt as an egg replacement, I'm going to mix with that. So this process, basically, we are ensuring that all the sugar gets melted when you're mixing, and there are crystals are not present when you're actually putting the batter in the pan, so that when you eat the cake, you don't actually get granules or crystals of sugar. And then, so that's why the next step is I'm taking 1/2 cup of sugar, and then I'm taking 1/4 cup of curds. Curd you can use homemade, store-bought. But one thing I always advise while using a curd is to not include a lot of water that's present in the curd, kind of take the solid part of the curd, because we don't want the batter to be a lot watery. So you can also end up using Greek yogurt if you don't have access to yogurt. So these are the different options. So once I have my yogurt and sugar together, I'm going to use a whisk to kind of mix it, and I'll mix it till the sugar melts. Okay, so now I see it's melted nicely. I see the sugar has combined with the yogurt. Yep. So once you're done with the next step, I'm going to add the other wet ingredients. So my next one is going to be oil. So if you're using oil while baking a cake, I would highly recommend to use any flavorless oil. So it can be vegetable oil or canola oil. So if you end up using olive oil has a peculiar taste. So when you put it in your cake, you kind of get the hint of an olive oil also in your cake. So that's why any flavorless oil is always recommended. So oil, I need about 3 tablespoons of oil. So measuring liquid ingredients is pretty easy because you just put it till it levels up in your measuring unit. So here it's tablespoon. It can be either in a measuring cup or even in a measuring glass. So I have 3 tablespoons of oil, and then I'm adding vanilla essence, about a quarter teaspoon. And then I'll mix it well. So I see the oil and the vanilla essence is well incorporated. And next I'll add orange sugar to this, orange juice to this. So that is quarter cup of orange juice. So I like to use a measuring glass whenever I'm measuring any liquid. So they have nice calibration and it is easier to look exactly how much ml of the liquid that you want. So as and when I pour the orange juice, I continuously mix it so it gets easily incorporated with the liquid batter. So I have added all my liquid ingredients. So my wet ingredients are in mixing bowl 1. The dry ingredients are in mixing bowl 2. The only ingredient that is left is to add orange zest. So adding orange zest is optional. I love to add orange zest or lemon zest whenever I'm baking because the zest ends up giving a lot more flavor to the cake. So here our orange juice is the main ingredient that gives the orange flavor to the cake, but the orange zest adds kind of an extra that magic to the baking or to your cake, and it releases a very nice flavor. So since I have small oranges, I'm taking 2. One thing while zesting an orange or a lemon that you have to keep in mind that you have to zest only the top layer and you don't have to keep on zesting till the bottom layer. So the bottom layer is mainly white and that's where the bitter taste resides. So if you end up zesting a lot, then you add a lot of bitter component to your cake and we do not want that. So I just take my grater and this is the orange that I'm using. So I'm just slightly grating it, just ensuring that I don't end up adding the white skin to my batter. So if you can see, I have used a lot of the main orange part of the skin and the white skin is still left behind. So that's what I do. So I've added my orange zest. I'm just mixing it.
Shraddha,
Okay.
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Can you just show the bowl once to see the consistency while you're mixing?
Sure. So this is the consistency of the liquid. So it's very liquidy. It's mainly because of the orange juice that we have added. But when you're mixing the yogurt and the sugar, it's not that watery. So this is the consistency. Just let me know if you can see it.
Yes, thank you.
So the next process, like I said, the final one is to mix the dry and the wet ingredients. So you can do it in a couple of ways. You can either take all the wet ingredients, pour it in your dry ingredients and just mix it. or vice versa. Take all your dry ingredients, put it in the wet ingredients, and just mix it. But what I like to do is mix the two ingredients in batches. Because if you put all your dry ingredients at once and you start mixing, it's a higher chance that it will fall out of the bowl when you're mixing it nicely. And the second one is when you mix it in batches, then you can ensure that you're incorporating and mixing it very well, and it's kind of easier as well. So since I just have a little batter, I'll be breaking into two batches. So I'm just putting about like 3 spoons of dry ingredients in my wet ingredient bowl, and then I'm using a spatula to mix it. You can also use a whisk, but I recommend a spatula because of the whisk wires. There's a high chance that the batter might get stuck between them and it gets difficult to clean. And when you use a spatula, you can always easily scrape up the sides of the bowl and mix it. So I start mixing these wet ingredients. So I've put my dry ingredient, like you see, I'm scraping the side of the bowl and then slowly mixing it with the wet ingredient. So like you can see, you don't see much flour pockets in this. So we have done with the first mixing part, and then I end up adding the remaining dry ingredients to this. Hopefully now it's much visible. Okay, hopefully this batter is visible now. So when you mix the dry and wet ingredients, one rule of thumb is always maintain the direction in which you're mixing. It can be clockwise or anti-clockwise. So don't just randomly mix it up or do 2 turns of clockwise and then again reverse it. So just keep it in one direction. And between each mix, make sure that you're incorporating all the dry ingredients that are stuck to the side of the bowl. So yeah, I finished mixing up my wet and dry ingredients. So like you can see, I do not see any flour pockets or any dry ingredients pockets, and that the wet and the dry mixture have been well incorporated. So how much to mix, like till what point? We don't want to always end up overbeating. So the right way is you keep on mixing till you see no flour pockets or no dry ingredients pockets in this. So what happens is when you're mixing the dry and the wet ingredients, the air is getting incorporated in this. So when the air gets incorporated and you transfer the batter into your baking pan, the cake rises very nicely and it becomes soft. But if you overbeat the batter, you kind of end up removing all the air formation that's happening. So there won't be any air pockets left in this, and you'll have a very dense and a short cake. So that's why we just mix enough till all the ingredients are combined, and we want to avoid over mixing of the batter. So yes, pretty much we are ready with our batter right now. So you can see the beautiful orange zest in the batter here. I normally don't like adding colors a lot to my cake. And I prefer adding colors to my frosting. But if you're just presenting the cake plain and you want to enhance the color, you can always add a drop or two of orange gel color. And that would actually help, make the cake look more beautiful. But somehow I prefer the natural orange color that comes in. So that's up to you. That's again optional adding color. It's not mandatory. So I have 2 pans prepped here to add my batter. So if you're using a round 8-inch pan, you just take the batter and put it here. And you don't have to do any extra effort as to make it even. You just bang the pan to the floor a couple of times, and then the batter spreads out evenly. So when it is baking, the batter kind of melts and then it also spreads out evenly. So you do not have to take any extra effort to ensure that it's flat or if it's even throughout. With the cupcake pan, so I have 6 cupcake liners. How I like to distribute is the batter is I like to use a spoon to distribute the batter. Some people end up using an ice cream scoop as well. So this basically ensures that you are distributing your batter evenly. So I'll be using my spoon. So to begin with, I'll be just taking 1 spoon of batter and putting it in each of the cupcake liner. So now again distribute the remaining batter in each of these cupcake liners. So another rule that I follow or also observe with other bakers is whenever you're baking cupcakes, you do not fill more than 3/4 of the cupcake, the batter more than 3/4 of the capacity, because cupcakes will rise, and if you fill more, then they'll overflow and kind of ruin the shape of the cupcake that you want. And it's the same thing with any other baking pan. So always the rule is fill it up to 3/4 of the capacity of the pan and not more than that. So this will ensure that even when the cake rises, it has enough room to rise and it won't overflow. So to clean the bowl nicely, you can just use a spatula and then just add it to the cake. So here we are. So we have our mold and the batter ready. So the next step is to put this tray in your preset oven. So for this cake, it takes about, you have to bake it at 180 degrees Celsius or 356 degrees Fahrenheit. And for me, normally the cupcakes takes about 15 to 18 minutes to bake. And with this cupcake, it took for me like about 18 minutes to get it baked. So the general rule is when any baker says it takes about 15 to 20 minutes or 15 to 18 minutes to bake, what I like to follow is first set up the timer for at least the basic amount. That's like with this cupcake, it would be 15 minutes. And then every minute or two, I keep on checking if the cake is ready or not, and if I have to bake it for some more time. And even if I say for me it took 18 minutes, for some of you, it might end up taking 20 minutes, or sometimes the cake might be done in 15 minutes. So it all depends also upon the oven that you have and how it bakes. So the time varies, and that's why we give a general range of 15 to 20 minutes. So with my cupcakes, it took 18 minutes. So I set up a timer for 15 once I put it in the oven. And then after 15 minutes, I keep on checking to see if the cake is baked or not. So a couple of different ways to check if a cupcake has been baked or not is one, the right method is take a toothpick, insert it in the center of the cupcake, and if it comes out to be clean, it means your cupcake is baked. The second thing is as you bake and you have more experience, you understand just by looking at the cake. So a certain couple of hints are the top of the cake starts to brown. They actually kind of leave from the side of the pan. So these are different ways, but the most foolproof method is take a knife, take a fork, or take a toothpick, just insert in the center. And if it comes out to be clean, then it means your cake is baked. So that is the cooking time for a cupcake. But if you end up using like an 8-inch pan, so it takes about 20 to 25 minutes to bake the same batter in a pan. So for me, it took roughly about 23 minutes. I followed the same rule again. I said I baked the cake for 20 minutes. After it hit the 20-minute mark, I would keep on occasionally checking if the cake is baked or not. The same method to understand if a cake is baked. Take a toothpick, a knife, a fork, anything that you wish. Pick it up, put it in the center, and then when you take it out, it has to come clean. Or the other signs that your cake is baked is the top layer of the cake starts to brown, and also it starts to leave from the side. So it becomes it shows that it's baked, it's not sticking to the wall. But however, sometimes even a baked cake can stick to the sides of the pan. So that's why, again, the foolproof method is put a toothpick at the center of the cake, and if you pull it out and it comes out clean, it means your cake is baked. Why do we do that at the center and not at the side? So when you start baking a cake, the way it bakes it, the side of the cake or the outer edge of the cake starts to bake first, and then it comes to the center, and the center part is the last part to actually get baking. So if you put at the side of the cake bakes faster, so you feel the cake is baked. But when you cut it and eat it, the center is still unbaked. So the best way, or that's why we always suggest to kind of go at the center and check if the test has to be done at the center part of the cake and not at the side. You can always confirm the side as well, but center is a must. So this is how you can understand if the cake has baked or not. Now, I suggested that you can use either an 8-inch baking pan or at least 6 cupcakes. But if you want a thicker layer of the cake, you can end up using a smaller pan. That would be about 6-inch. I feel the batter would overflow in it. So if you're making one 6-inch cake, then I think you might end up having at least 2 cupcake batter left. And if you're baking a 6-inch cake, then the baking time would also increase. So it was not necessarily same as an 8-inch pan, but then maintain the simple basic rule. Bake it for 20 minutes, keep on looking at the cake. And once after 20 minutes, keep on checking the center of the cake, if it has baked or not. Another easy way to check if your cake is baking or not, or if the center has baked, is when you open the oven and just look at the pan. If you shake it, the center of the cake starts to wobble. If it is wobbling, it means the center is not yet cooked, it's still in that process. So even that test, you can do it as an initial test before you like actually use a toothpick kind of check if the center of the cake has baked or not. So these are a couple of different ways that you can actually use the same batter in different molds. And yeah, that's about baking this cake. So I know like it takes about like 15 to 20 minutes to bake a cake. So I actually took this opportunity to kind of bake the cake in both molds. So I baked cupcakes. So this is how your cupcake would end up looking. Like you can see the batter here is white. You can see there is a brownish layer on the top of the cake. Here there is a brownish layer. It's soft. And the other test that most experienced bakers also use it, if you press the cupcake, it should bounce back, and that tells you that if the cupcake is done or not. But unfortunately, I haven't reached that level yet. So I end up using a knife. I just put it in the center and then take it out, and I see there is no batter sticking to it. I used baking an 8-inch pan, the same pan that I showed. So you can see there is a nice thin layer that forms in the cake. So if you want a layer thicker than this, then you can use a smaller pan. Or you can just bake, double the recipe, make 2 layers of cake and add some frosting in between and have like a layered cake. So these are the different ways that you can bake the same batter. And that's how you bake an eggless orange cake. So I'm open to any questions if you have.
So there's a question from our audience. Is there any replacement for maida?
You can use wheat flour. I haven't personally tested replacing the maida in it, but wheat flour is a very good alternative. People are also using coconut flour and almond flour. There are these alternatives available, but I have personally not tested this recipe with those flours.
Okay. So there's another question. For how much time should we prep the oven at 180 degrees Celsius?
So you prep the oven as soon as you have all your ingredients ready and right before mixing. So this entire process of mixing takes about 10 minutes, and the 10 minutes should be good enough for your oven to reach the temperature that you want to bake at.
All right. I think there are no more questions. If any, I will ask you. So
sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for demonstrating and sharing with us this delicious recipe of the eggless orange cake. And it was a really informative session. We all enjoyed it very much, and especially the tips which you gave. I think they are really beneficial. And a huge thank you for taking out time and conducting this session today, being a part of this session today.
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Gokul, the Youthwing, Priyanjali, and you for giving me this opportunity. I mean, I love baking cake, and I've pretty much been baking it for myself or for my family and friends. But this was an amazing opportunity to actually bake for a larger crowd and larger audience. So guys, if you're baking and something does not turn up well, or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll try my level best to actually help you and solve any of the issues that you have.
Thank you so much, Shraddha.
Thank you.
I hope the audience enjoyed too. The audience is the most important part of any program. So we thank you all for being part of the Youthwing family and encouraging us to look forward to the next session every time. We also thank the president and the managing committee of the BSKBA Association for giving us this opportunity, as well as for their support and encouragement for helping us provide this platform for the vast talent pool of our association. I would also like to thank Guru Prasad Bhatt, Priyanjali Rao, Sri Lakshmi Udupa, and Janavi Poti for all the coordination. Please subscribe to our channel and also follow us on Instagram by the name Youthwing_BSKBA. Thank you everyone for joining in. Namaskara.